You'll marry him, Ariel. If you walk away from this church today, our family will lose everything. I'm not ready for this.
Isn't she the bride whose mother gave her away to pay a debt? Poor girl.
She never even had a choice.
Ariel, do you willingly accept Thierry Kamau as your husband?
I do.
There's something I've wanted to tell you for a very long time.
Whatever it is, you can tell me.
In a few hours, that single gift would leave the entire church speechless and force everyone who had treated a woman as the price of settling a debt to lower their heads in shame. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. Do you agree to marry Thierry Kamau? Pastor Daniel Mwangi asked in a deep, solemn voice inside the modern church in Karen, Nairobi. His question echoed through the wide sanctuary, where the silence was so still that even the soft hum of the air conditioner could be heard. Ariel Ashieng tightened her grip around the bouquet of white orchids in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her white wedding gown was tailored perfectly to her slender figure, decorated with modern Maasai-inspired embroidery that made her look like the center of a dream. Anyone looking at her would have believed she was a happy bride on the most beautiful day of her life. Only Ariel knew her heart felt as heavy as stone. At exactly 8:18 a.m., just a few minutes before the wedding began, her mother had pulled her into a small room behind the church. Claudine Achieng was wearing a luxurious gold umushanana, a pearl necklace around her neck, her makeup so flawless that no one could have guessed she had not slept properly for many nights. But her eyes could not hide the panic inside her. Once you walk into that sanctuary today, everything will be over. I am begging you. Ariel looked at the woman who had raised her for 24 years. She wanted to ask how a mother could use her daughter's future to pay a debt. But when she saw her mother's shoulders shaking under pressure, every question became trapped in her throat. Outside the door, the piano began to play. It was time. There was no way back. When Ariel walked into the sanctuary, hundreds of eyes turned toward her at once. Rows of chairs covered in white fabric stretched beneath crystal lights. On both sides of the aisle, white orchids and cream roses had been arranged with elegant care. The soft fragrance mixed with the music, creating the kind of luxurious scene any young woman might have once dreamed of. But today, Ariel could not see its beauty. All she saw were the eyes. Some showed pity, some showed curiosity, some carried hidden smiles. A woman sitting near the back leaned toward the person beside her and whispered, "Is that the girl who was married off to settle a debt?" The other woman nodded softly. "I heard her mother borrowed money for a boutique investment and lost everything." Their voices were low, but Ariel still heard them. She did not turn around. If she turned around now, her tears would fall. At the end of the aisle, Thierry Kamau was waiting. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. The turquoise Kitenji pocket square in his jacket added a modern but proudly Kenyan touch. His face was strangely calm. There was no triumph in his eyes, no pride of a man who had just married a beautiful woman. There was none of the possessive look Ariel had feared for days, only calmness. That confused her even more. When Ariel reached his side, Thierry only gave her a small nod, like a respectful greeting. He did not take her hand. He did not pull her close. He did not say anything. Pastor Daniel continued the ceremony. Marriage is not a bond built through power, but a promise to walk together in respect. Ariel almost smiled bitterly. The word respect sounded so far away today. She had never even been asked if she wanted this marriage. In the front row, Claudine lowered her head. The designer handbag on her lap still had the new smell of a shop display. It was something she had bought with the last money she had, just to preserve her image before relatives and guests. She knew very well that many people had not come to this wedding to bless her daughter. They had come to witness, to whisper, to see whether the Achieng family would rise again or fall completely. Pastor Daniel turned to Ariel. "Do you agree?" Her throat went dry. A silence stretched for a few seconds, and the whole church seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she spoke in a small voice. "I do." No one knew that in that very moment, a part of her heart quietly closed. Then the pastor turned to Thierry. "And you?" Thierry looked straight ahead. "I do." His voice was deep and steady, not rushed, not uncertain. After the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, polite applause filled the sanctuary. Cameras flashed again and again. Guests stood to congratulate them. Thierry leaned slightly toward Ariel. "Are you hired?" The question startled her. It was the first thing he had said to her that day. "No," she answered automatically. "If you need to rest before we go to the reception, tell me." Ariel looked at him with suspicion. Was he acting for the people around them? Or was this truly who he was? Before she could think further, the wedding coordinator invited the bride and groom outside for photographs. Morning sunlight poured over the church garden. Guests gathered in small groups. Several well-known Nairobi businessmen shook Thierry's hand with respect. A few women in elegant gowns whispered as Ariel passed by. "She is beautiful. Beautiful, yes." But still a dead bride. Ariel heard them. Thierry heard them too. He paused slightly, but instead of turning back to argue, he simply slowed his steps and walked beside Ariel. The distance between them, once cold and unfamiliar, suddenly became just enough. Not close enough to make her uncomfortable, but not far enough to leave her alone under those judging eyes. A black luxury car was waiting at the church gate. The coordinator smiled. "Sir, madam, we will now move to the hotel in Westlands." Thierry opened the car door first. He did not touch Ariel. He only held out his hand gently, like an invitation. Ariel looked at that hand for a long time. In her mind, her mother's words returned. "You only need to marry him. After today, everything will be fine." But would everything truly be fine? Slowly, Ariel placed her hand in Thierry's. It was only a light touch. But neither of them knew that this small moment would begin a truth very different from what all of Nairobi believed. The black Rolls-Royce drove away from the church grounds under the sound of guests offering their congratulations. Ariel Ashiengs sat close to the window, her hands folded so tightly together that her knuckles had turned pale. Outside, rows of purple jacaranda trees stretched along the road from Karen towards central Nairobi. The modern city appeared ahead, with glass buildings reflecting the morning sun, busy cafes, and luxury cars moving along the avenue. Everything looked beautiful. Only her heart remained as heavy as it had been at the altar. Thierry Kamau sat beside her, but he kept a careful distance. He did not force conversation. He did not stare at her for too long. After a few minutes of silence, he asked softly, "Would you like the air conditioning lower?" Ariel flinched slightly. "No need." "All right." Just one short answer. Then he looked forward again. The car became so quiet that only the engine and the soft jazz music from the speakers could be heard. Ariel began to feel strange. If this was the man who had agreed to marry her in exchange for clearing her mother's debt, why was he behaving as if he were traveling with a guest, not the woman who had just become his wife? About 30 minutes later, the car did not turn toward the hotel where the reception was supposed to be held. Instead, it continued toward the villas of Karen. Ariel turned to him. "Isn't there still a wedding reception?" Thierry answered calmly. "I asked for it to be moved to the evening." She was surprised. "Why? I thought you needed to rest first." Ariel did not know what to say. This man kept doing things that did not fit anything she had imagined. The car stopped in front of a tall iron gate, surrounded by neatly trimmed green hedges. When the gate opened, a large villa appeared with modern architecture, white glass panels reflecting the small lake in the garden, and bright bird of paradise flowers blooming around the yard. An older house manager stepped forward and bowed. "Welcome, sir." Then he turned to Ariel. "Welcome, madam." Ariel nodded politely. Thierry spoke. "This is Samuel. He has managed this house for more than 15 years. Samuel smiled gently. "It is a pleasure to meet you." No one looked curious. No one looked at her with pity. That made Ariel feel a little lighter. Inside the villa, everything was minimalist but elegant. Shining marble floors, modern African paintings along the hallway, natural light pouring through tall glass windows from ceiling to floor. Thierry placed his car keys on the table. "I'll show you your room." Ariel followed him silently. She had prepared herself for the bedroom of a married couple. But when Thierry opened the wooden door at the end of the hallway, she was completely stunned. It was a private bedroom, spacious, beautiful, with a balcony facing the garden. A work corner with bookshelves, a large dressing room. Everything had been prepared with care. Thierry placed her suitcase down. "This will be your room." Ariel stared at him. And your room? Thierry pointed toward the opposite end of the hallway. Over there. She looked at him without blinking. You mean Weasel stays in separate rooms? The room fell silent. After a while, Ariel finally spoke. Why? Thierry looked at her calmly. Because I think you need time. She did not know how to react. For so many nights, she had prepared herself for the worst. Yet the man before her was talking about time. Thierry walked toward the door. He placed a key on the table. This is the room key. Then he pointed at the electronic lock. You can set your own code. Ariel froze. If you want to lock the door, do it. I will not come in. If I need to speak with you, I will knock. His voice was even, as if he was saying something completely ordinary. But to Ariel, it felt impossible. She looked at the key for a long time. Aren't you afraid? Afraid of what? If I leave? Thierry smiled very faintly. If a person has to be locked inside to stay, then keeping them with a key means nothing. Those words left Ariel speechless. For the first time since everything began, she had no answer for the man who had become her husband. Thierry stepped back. Rest. At 3 in the afternoon, we will return to the hotel. If you do not want to come downstairs to eat, Samuel will bring food up. After saying that, he gave a small nod and left the room. He did not look back once. The door closed softly. Ariel stood still in the middle of the room. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then she walked to the door. She locked it. The electronic lock beeped quietly. She leaned against the wall and slowly sat down on the floor. The tears finally came. Not because of pain, but because she could not understand the man who had just become her husband. Downstairs, Samuel was preparing tea when he saw Thierry standing near the glass door, looking out at the garden. He asked gently, Is she all right? Thierry kept his eyes on the small lake. She is very afraid. Samuel fell silent. He had worked for Thierry long enough to know his employer never spoke without meaning. After a moment, he asked, Are you going to tell her? Thierry shook his head. Not yet, but sooner or later she will know. Samuel nodded. I hope when she knows, she will not blame you. Thierry gave a sad little smile. If she does, I will accept it. Samuel looked at the man before him. He knew Thierry had prepared something very important for this day. But he also knew that the gift would only matter if Ariel opened her heart to receive it by choice. That afternoon, Ariel stepped out of her room, wearing a long emerald green dress with modern kitenge details. She stopped when she saw Thierry waiting in the living room. He had also changed into an elegant light grey suit. When he saw her, he only smiled. You look very beautiful. Ariel blushed slightly. Thank you. It was the first time that day she answered him without coldness in her voice. Just then Thierry's phone rang. The name on the screen appeared clearly. Claudine Achieng. Thierry looked at the screen for a few seconds, then answered. On the other end, Claudine's voice was full of worry. Thierry, I need to see you immediately. There is something I never told you about Ariel. Thierry looked at Ariel, who was standing a few steps away. His expression slowly became serious. A truth he had never known was about to come to light. Thierry Kamau's phone screen remained lit in his hand. He stared at the name Claudine Achieng for a few more seconds before walking out onto the balcony behind the living room to answer the call. Ariel stood quietly inside, making no attempt to overhear the conversation, yet something deep inside told her it had everything to do with her. Hello, Mrs. Achieng. On the other end, Claudine's voice had lost every trace of composure. Thierry, I need to see you immediately. What happened? There are things I never told you. Thierry frowned slightly. I'm on my way to the hotel. No, Claudine interrupted him. Please come to my house first. Just 15 minutes. Thierry remained silent. Her voice trembled. If I don't tell you today, I may never have the courage again. The call ended. Thierry stood on the balcony for a long moment, staring into the garden. He had believed this marriage was the result of a difficult but mutual agreement between two families. He had accepted it because he thought Ariel understood everything and had chosen to help her mother. But after seeing the look in her eyes at the wedding, he had begun to doubt, and now it seemed his worst suspicion was about to be confirmed. He walked back into the living room. I need to stop by your mother's house for about 20 minutes. Ariel immediately looked up. My mother's? Yes. Is it something wrong? I don't know yet. Ariel bit her lip gently. Should I come with you? Thierry shook his head. No. I'll come back and pick you up. His voice remained calm. No accusations, no pressure, nothing that made her feel like she was being questioned. That only confused Ariel even more. At exactly 2:37 p.m., Thierry's car stopped in front of the Achieng family home in Runda. It had once been one of the most elegant houses in the neighborhood. Now, although the garden was still carefully maintained, signs of financial hardship were everywhere. The fountain in the courtyard no longer worked. Several large flower pots had disappeared. The luxury car that once occupied the garage was gone. Claudine was already waiting at the front door. She was still wearing the outfit from the wedding, but in just a few hours, she seemed to have aged years. Come in. Thierry followed her into the living room. The luxury remained, but it was fading. Several expensive paintings had been removed from the walls. The crystal display cabinet was now half empty. Thierry understood. The family was truly on the edge of collapse. Claudine poured 2 cups of tea. Her hand shook so badly that a few drops spilled onto the table. After a long silence, she finally spoke. Do you know that Ariel hates me? Thierry looked at her quietly. I don't think she does. Claudine let out a bitter smile. She never says it. But I know. She lowered her head. And I deserve it. Silence filled the room. Finally, she pulled a thick brown folder from a drawer. I lied to you. Thierry looked at the folder. What do you mean? I told you Ariel agreed to this marriage. That wasn't true. Thierry said nothing. He simply tightened his hands. Claudine continued. She refused. From the very beginning, she told me marriage should never be a way to pay a debt. Her voice began to break. But I kept forcing her. I cried. I begged. I told her if she refused, we would lose the house. We would lose everything. I even told her that I wouldn't survive if our family fell apart. Thierry slowly closed his eyes. Every missing piece finally fell into place. Ariel had never been cold. She had never been arrogant. She had simply never been given a choice. After another long silence, Thierry asked, why didn't you tell me the truth? Claudine laughed through her tears. Because I was afraid. Afraid you would cancel the wedding. Afraid the bank would take the house. Afraid everyone would look down on us. She looked up at him. For more than 20 years, I worked to build the image of a successful woman. I couldn't bear the thought of people seeing me as a failure. Thierry looked at the woman sitting before him. He did not see an evil mother. He saw a woman consumed by fear, so consumed that she had wounded her own daughter. Do you know what Ariel lost the most? Claudine wiped away her tears. What? Trust. She no longer believes anyone will ever ask what she wants. Those words shattered whatever strength Claudine had left. I'm sorry. I know it's too late. I only ask, please don't hate her. Thierry stood up. I have never hated Ariel, and I never will. He gently pushed the folder back toward Claudine. Keep it. I don't need it. She stared at him in surprise. You're not angry? Thierry looked toward the garden where the afternoon sunlight had begun to fade. I am, but I'm not the one who deserves your apology. Without another word, he walked toward the door. Claudine remained frozen. She watched her son-in-law disappear through the entrance. For the first time, she realized that the greatest blessing Ariel had received was not marrying a wealthy man. It was marrying a man who knew the difference between love and possession. On the drive back to Karen, Thierry did not turn on the radio. His mind replayed the image of Ariel standing at the altar with tears in her eyes. He remembered every detail. She had never looked at her mother. She had barely looked at the guests. Even when she whispered, I do, her voice had trembled more than any bride he had ever seen. At the time, he thought she was simply nervous. Now he understood. It was the voice of someone who had been forced to step into a life she never chose. When he arrived at the villa, Samuel opened the door before he even reached it. Welcome back, sir. Thierry nodded. Where is she? Samuel smiled gently. Miss Ariel is in the garden. Thierry walked quietly along the stone path. At the far end of the garden, Ariel sat alone on a white wooden bench beside the small lake reflecting the Nairobi sky. She heard his footsteps and turned around. You're back! Thierry looked at her for a long moment. For the first time since meeting her, something unexpected stirred inside him. Not pity, but the desire to make things right. He sat down on the bench across from her. Ariel, yes, I want to ask you something. She nodded softly. If there had never been your mother's death, he paused, would you have agreed to marry me? The question completely caught Ariel off guard. Her eyes widened. P was happy. For the first time in her life, someone had finally asked the question that should have been asked from the very beginning. P. Ariel, if there had never been your mother's death, would you have agreed to marry me? Thierry Cameau's question lingered in the quiet garden behind the villa in Karen. P. A gentle breeze stirred the palm trees while small ripples spread across the lake beneath the warm evening sunlight. Ariel sat motionless, both hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. It was the question no one had ever asked her. Not her mother, not her relatives, not the marriage broker, not even the people who spent their days gossiping about her family's death. Thierry waited patiently. He did not rush her. He did not study her with suspicious eyes. He simply waited. After a long silence, Ariel finally took a deep breath. I don't know. Thierry nodded gently. I understand. No. Ariel slowly shook her head. I really don't know. She looked directly into his eyes for the first time since the wedding. If I had met you under different circumstances, she paused, maybe I would have wanted to get to know you. But this marriage took away the chance for that to happen. Thierry fell silent, not because her answer was cruel, but because he knew she was right. The saddest part was not that Ariel did not love him. It was that she had never been given the chance to begin. He smiled softly. Thank you. She looked surprised. For what? For telling me the truth. She lowered her eyes. I'm tired of saying what everyone else wants to hear. Then from now on, Thierry looked at her calmly. Don't say what you think I want to hear. Say what you truly feel. Another silence settled between them. But this one felt different. It was no longer heavy. At exactly 6:14 p.m. Their car arrived at the luxury hotel in Westlands, where the wedding reception had been prepared weeks in advance. The ballroom sparkled beneath hundreds of crystal chandeliers. Round tables covered in white linen stretched across the room, decorated with orchids and cream-colored roses. Business executives, architects, fashion designers, and Thierry's corporate partners had already gathered. Soft violin music floated through the air. The moment Ariel and Thierry entered, everyone stood and applauded. Camera flashes lit up the room. A well-known Nairobi master of ceremonies smiled brightly. Please welcome the bride and groom. The applause grew louder. Ariel forced herself to smile, but she quickly realized not everyone had come to celebrate. On the right side of the ballroom, 3 elegantly dressed women watched her carefully. One of them took a sip of champagne. I thought Thierry would marry a successful businesswoman. Another laughed quietly. Instead, he married the daughter of a bankrupt boutique owner. The third shrugged. Well, at least her mother knew how to save the family. The 3 women laughed together. Ariel heard every word. Her steps slowed. Thierry heard them too. He turned slightly toward her. Are you all right? Ariel took a deep breath. I'm fine. But her eyes had changed. She no longer wanted to run away. She no longer wanted to cry. She was simply exhausted. A few moments later, Valerie and Jerry hurried over. Ariel. The 2 women embraced warmly. Valerie looked closely at her friend's face. Are you okay? Ariel smiled softly. I'm still here. Valerie knew that smile. It was the smile Ariel always wore whenever she was hiding her pain. She gently led Ariel toward a quieter corner. How's your mother? Ariel's sister sighed. I don't know. And Thierry? Ariel looked across the ballroom at the man shaking hands with guests. I don't know either. Valerie frowned. What do you mean? I don't understand him. He's nothing like I imagined. Just then, Thierry walked over. He nodded politely to Valerie. Thank you for coming. She smiled. She's my closest friend. I know. Thierry turned to Ariel. Have you eaten anything? She shook her head. No, I'll bring you something. You don't have to wait here. Before she could protest, he walked away. Valerie watched him go before nudging Ariel gently. Is he always like this? Ariel gave a small shake of her head. I've only known him for 1 day. The 2 friends laughed quietly. It was the first genuine laugh Ariel had shared since the morning. But the moment did not last. On the stage, the master of ceremonies began introducing several honored guests. Then he smiled. And now we would like to invite the bridesmaids. Claudine Achieng slowly walked onto the stage as polite applause filled the room. She took the microphone. Her eyes were already red. She looked down at Ariel. I'd like to say a few words. The ballroom fell silent. Claudine took a deep breath. For many years, I believed a mother should do whatever it takes to protect her family. P. I believed that if someone had to sacrifice, it was worth it. Her voice began to tremble. But today, I finally realized the person I sacrificed was never myself. P. Her eyes remained fixed on Ariel. If I have hurt you, I'm sorry. The entire ballroom froze. Ariel's eyes widened. P. She had never imagined her mother would apologize in front of hundreds of people. Whispers immediately spread across the room. What's happening? What is she talking about? P. Did the bride's mother just apologize? Claudine lowered her head. I thought I was saving my family. But the truth is, I forgot that my daughter also deserved the right to choose. P. Several guests quietly lowered their eyes. The atmosphere in the ballroom changed completely. Thierry stood below the stage. He looked at Claudine for a long moment. Then he looked at Ariel. P. He knew this was not the final truth. The gift he had prepared still rested inside the black leather briefcase in his study at the villa. P. And he also knew the moment to reveal it was drawing very near. After Claudine Akieng's public apology, the wedding reception at the luxury hotel in Westlands fell into an unusual silence. P. It was not the polite silence of guests waiting for the next speech. It was the silence that comes when people hear a truth too powerful to ignore. Crystal chandeliers still sparkled overhead. P. White orchids still decorated every table. Guests remained dressed in elegant suits, vibrant African gowns, and expensive jewelry. Yet in that moment, none of the luxury could hide the growing discomfort spreading through the ballroom. P. Ariel Achieng stood frozen beneath the stage. She had never heard her mother apologize before. Not at home. Not on the night Ariel cried herself to sleep. P. Not when she begged her mother not to turn marriage into a way of paying a debt. Yet today, in front of hundreds of people, Claudine had lowered her head. P. Strangely, it hurt even more, because sometimes an apology that arrives too late does not only bring relief, it also awakens every wound that someone has spent years trying to bury. P. Claudine remained on the stage, gripping the microphone tightly. Her flawless makeup could no longer hide her tear-filled eyes. She looked down at her daughter and spoke quietly. P. I was afraid of losing our home, afraid of losing my reputation, afraid that the people who once admired me would laugh at me. She swallowed hard. P. But I forgot to ask what my daughter was afraid of. Those words made Ariel lower her head. Thierry Kamau stood only a short distance away. P. He did not walk over to embrace her in front of everyone, nor did he try to create a touching scene for the guests. P. He simply remained where he was, giving Ariel the space to experience the moment in her own way. Valérie Niajoui stood beside her. Do you want to step outside? She whispered. P. Ariel gently shook her head. No, I want to hear everything. On the stage, Claudine turned toward the audience. I know many of you have heard about my family's debt. P. I also know that some of you came here today not to celebrate my daughter, but to watch how I would hide my shame. Several guests immediately lowered their eyes. P. Claudine smiled sadly. You don't have to pretend. I've spent too many years living for other people's opinions. The ballroom remained silent. P. I used to believe dignity meant convincing everyone that I was still wealthy, successful, and respected. But today I finally understand that if protecting my pride meant hurting my own daughter, then it was never dignity. P. She paused. It was only pride dressed in beautiful clothes. Ariel slowly lifted her eyes. For the first time, she no longer saw her mother as the powerful woman who had forced her into this marriage. P. She saw a mother crushed beneath the weight of her own mistakes. But compassion did not erase pain. Not that quickly. Claudine placed the microphone down and stepped off the stage. P. There was no applause. Perhaps no one knew how to applaud an apology like that. As she walked past Ariel, she stopped. I'm not asking you to forgive me today, she said softly. P. I only hope you'll believe that I finally begun to understand. Ariel looked at her. There were countless questions trapped inside her. P. Why had her mother only realized the truth after everything had happened? If Thierry had not been a kind man, would she still be apologizing? P. How many other women had been sacrificed in the name of family? But in the end, she said only 3 words. I heard you. Claudine's body trembled. She nodded. P. For a woman who had spent her entire life trying to control everything, those 3 words were both a comfort and a punishment. Only then did Thierry walk toward them. P. Would you like to sit down? He asked gently. Ariel looked at him. I'd like to step onto the balcony for a while. May I come with you? She hesitated for a few seconds before nodding. Together they left the ballroom through the tall glass doors leading to the second-floor terrace. Outside, Nairobi shimmered beneath the evening lights. The glass towers of Westlands reflected the city like scattered stars. A cool breeze lifted Ariel's veil as she rested her hands on the railing. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Ariel broke the silence. Did you know my mother was going to say those things? Terry shook his head. No. Then what did she tell you this afternoon? He looked directly at her. The truth. Ariel tightened her grip on the railing. What truth? That you never agreed to this marriage. Her throat tightened. So she told you? Yes. And what did you think? Terry remained quiet for a moment. I realized I had stood an altar without understanding the whole truth. Tears filled Ariel's eyes. You didn't know. No, but not knowing doesn't erase what happened. I know. His honest answer made it impossible for her to be angry in the way she had expected. Terry continued quietly. Ariel, I can't change the fact that yesterday you stood at that altar with a heart that wasn't free. But I can promise you something. She looked at him. From today onward, no one will ever make your choices for you again. Not even me. She stared at the city below. You make it sound so easy. It isn't. Then why do you keep saying it? Because you deserve to hear it from someone who refuses to make your freedom the price of love. Those words reached somewhere deep inside her. They were not poetic. They were not dramatic. They were simply true. Inside the ballroom, the music began again. The master of ceremonies tried to restore the joyful atmosphere with a dance performance. Guests slowly resumed their conversations, but something had changed. The laughter was quieter. The looks directed toward Ariel were no longer filled with judgment, because the truth had entered the room. And once the truth arrives, gossip often loses its confidence. Ariel took a slow breath. Do you still want to continue the reception? Terry looked at her. Only if you do. And if I say no, we'll go home. And if I say I want to stay, I'll stand beside you. She gave a tired smile. You always make everything sound simple. I'm only trying not to make it harder for you. She said nothing. She looked at the man standing before her, the husband she had never chosen, the stranger she had feared. The man who had learned the truth and yet never used it to make himself look like a hero. Instead, he quietly returned to her, piece by piece, the freedom that had been taken from her. And somehow that frightened her in a completely different way. Because when someone treats you with kindness after you've prepared yourself to be hurt, your heart no longer knows how to defend itself. Later that evening, they returned to the ballroom. Ariel did not smile much, but she no longer lowered her head. When an elderly guest came over to congratulate her, she looked the woman in the eyes and thanked her. When a businessman asked about her profession, she proudly explained that she was a handcrafted accessories designer who still dreamed of building her own brand. When someone tried to bring up her family's debt, Thierry quietly set down his glass, looked at the person with calm but unmistakable firmness, and the conversation ended immediately. Near the end of the reception, Valerie gently pulled Ariel aside. I've never seen you like this. Like what? Hurting but not broken. Aswell was silent. Then she smiled softly. I think I just realized that too. Across the ballroom, Claudine stood alone. She was no longer trying to impress wealthy guests, no longer pretending everything was perfect. She simply watched her daughter from a distance, as though realizing for the first time that Ariel was not an extension of herself, not her solution, not the shield protecting Zofnifle's reputation. Ariel was her own person, and Claudine had forgotten that. When the reception ended, Thierry drove Ariel back to the villa in Karen. The ride home was almost completely silent. But this silence was different from the one they had shared that morning. It was no longer the silence of two strangers forced into the same car. It was the silence that follows a day filled with painful truths. Samuel opened the front door as they arrived. How was the reception, madam? Ariel paused. She looked around the beautiful house. Then she looked at Thierry. It was a very long day. Samuel smiled knowingly. I understand. Thierry walked her upstairs. At the door to her room, Ariel turned around. Terry. Yes. Thank you for not speaking in my place. He looked at her quietly. I'm learning how to stand beside you, not in front of you. P. Her eyes suddenly stung with tears. She nodded gently and stepped into her room. This time she did not lock the door immediately. She simply closed it softly. P. Thierry remained standing in the hallway for a few seconds before returning to his own room. Inside, Ariel removed her earrings, placed her wedding bouquet on the table, and looked at herself in the mirror. P. She was still wearing the same white gown. She still looked exhausted, but something inside her eyes had changed. Yesterday morning, she had walked into the church as a woman being traded to settle a debt. P. Tonight, she stood in her room as a woman who had finally begun to hear her own voice again. And in the room across the hallway, Thierry opened the black leather briefcase and looked at the legal documents resting inside. He knew tomorrow would be the most important day of all. The real wedding gift had not yet been given. And when it finally was, not only Ariel, but everyone who had ever treated her like the price of a debt would understand that no woman is ever born to become the sacrifice for someone else's pride. The night over Karen was unusually quiet. After returning from the wedding reception, the only sounds inside the villa were the gentle flow of water from the garden pond and the warm glow of lights spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ariel Achieng stood on the balcony outside her room for a long time. In the distance, the lights of Nairobi still glittered, but inside her heart, her emotions remained tangled beyond words. She had prepared herself for a marriage built only on obligation. Yet in just one day, Thierry Kamau had done everything she had never expected. He had not controlled her. He had not forced her. He had not taken advantage of the fact that she was now his wife. And somehow, that made it even harder for Ariel to know for how to keep her distance. At exactly 7:12 a.m., the next morning, Ariel opened her bedroom door. By instinct, she stepped quietly, hoping to avoid running into Thierry. But as she reached the dining room downstairs, she stopped in surprise. The aroma of freshly toasted bread and hot coffee filled the room. Thierry was already seated at the breakfast table. A tablet displaying architectural blueprints lay open before him. Instead of his tailored business suit, he wore a simple white shirt and dark khaki trousers, making him seem far more approachable than the man she had met at the altar. Hearing her footsteps, he looked up. "Good morning," Ariel hesitated. "Good morning." Samuel placed a cup of hot tea in front of her. "Miss Ariel, I made chapatis mozing using a traditional Kenyan recipe. I hope you'll enjoy it." She smiled politely. "Thank you." The breakfast table remained quiet. Thierry did not force conversation. He simply reviewed his documents while sipping his coffee. After a few minutes, Ariel spoke first. "Aren't you going to the office today?" Thierry sixed down his cup. "I am. But I wanted to ask you something first." "What is it?" "Would you like to go out today?" She looked up. "Go out?" "Yes." "If you'd like, I'd like to show you a studio." "A studio?" "There's somewhere I want you to see." Ariel hesitated. Thierry smiled gently. "If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. The same answer again if you want. No pressure, no demands." Finally, Ariel nodded. "All right." About an hour later, their silver SUV stopped in front of a modern commercial building in Westlands. The lively street was lined with luxury boutiques, stylish cafes, and contemporary art galleries. Ariel couldn't hide her curiosity. Thierry led her into a sleek 3-story building. A female manager immediately greeted them. "Good morning, Mr. Kamau." Then she smiled warmly at Ariel. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Ariel blinked in surprise. "They know me?" Thierry simply smiled. "Come." They walked upstairs to the second floor. Thierry unlocked a large glass door. Ariel stopped in her tracks. The spacious interior stretched before her, fresh wooden floors, modern lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street, an elegant display area near the entrance, a private design room, a workshop space in the back. Everything was ready. She slowly stepped inside. "This is a studio. Whose is it?" Instead of answering, Thierry asked, "What do you think?" She walked toward the large work table in the center and gently ran her fingers across the polished wood. "It's beautiful." "If it were mine," she smiled without realizing it. "I'd place the main display by the windows, so customers would see the collection the moment they walked in." Thierry smiled. "I thought the same thing." She continued walking around the empty space. Without realizing it, she began imagining handcrafted leather bags, woven scarves, and accessories she had always dreamed of creating displayed throughout the studio. It had once been her dream. A dream she had buried the day her mother announced the marriage. After a while, she turned toward him. "Why did you bring me here?" Theory looked around the room. "I wanted to know something." "What? If one day you were completely free to choose your own future, what kind of life would you build?" Ariel looked at him in silence. That question made something inside her heart tremble. It had been so long since anyone had asked about her dreams. Just then, Ariel's phone vibrated. The screen displayed one name, Mother. She glanced at Thierry. "I should answer." Of course. She stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the street. On the other end, Claudine's voice was soft. "Ariel, yes, Mom? I'd like to see you. Is something wrong? I want to apologize again. You already apologized yesterday." "No." "Yesterday I apologized in front of everyone, but I never apologized to you as your mother." Ariel closed her eyes. Claudine continued. "Last night I went into your room." Ariel remained silent. "I found all the fashion sketches you had hidden inside your wardrobe." "My daughter, I finally realized I never once asked what kind of life you truly wanted." Tears slowly rolled down Ariel's cheeks. Her mother's voice trembled. "If I could go back, I would choose to lose the house instead of losing your smile." The call ended. Ariel remained standing on the balcony for a long time. When she returned inside, Thierry did not ask what her mother had said. Instead, he quietly handed her a tissue. She accepted it. "Aren't you curious?" "I am." "Then why didn't you ask?" Thierry looked toward the glass windows. "I think if you want to tell me, you will." For the first time since the wedding, Ariel smiled from the heart. It was small, but genuine. Later that afternoon, just before they left the studio, Thierry received a phone call from his lawyer. He stepped outside to answer. The lawyer spoke briefly. "Everything has been finalized. You can sign tomorrow." Thierry looked through the glass wall. Inside, Ariel was still walking slowly around the studio, her eyes filled with hope she hadn't even realized she still possessed. He replied quietly, "Thank you. I'll be there on time." After ending the call, Thierry opened the black leather briefcase. Inside lay the completed legal documents. He gently ran his hand across the first page. Tomorrow, the wedding gift he had prepared weeks earlier would officially become Ariel's. But he still didn't know after receiving it, would she choose to stay? Or would she take that gift and begin an entirely new life without him? At exactly 9:16 p.m., Thierry Kamau's car pulled into the parking area of a prestigious law firm in Upper Hill, Nairobi. The glass-covered building reflected the bright morning sky. Its spacious lobby, lined with polished marble floors and towering palm plants, looked more like the headquarters of an international corporation than a legal office. Ariel Achieng stepped out of the car and looked around curiously. "Why did you bring me here?" Thierry smiled. "I have an appointment. Do I need to be part of it?" "Only if you choose to." There it was again, "if you choose." Ariel suddenly realized that Thierry had never once told her she had no choice. The two of them entered the elevator. On the 14th floor, a middle-aged woman wearing a cream-colored business suit welcomed them. "Good morning, Mr. Kamau." She then turned to Ariel. "Good morning, Ms. Ariel. I'm Miriam Odiambo. I'm the attorney handling today's documents." Ariel politely shook her hand. The three of them entered a conference room. A thick stack of legal documents and several sealed envelopes had already been arranged neatly on a large walnut table. Attorney Miriam opened the file. "Mr. Kamau, everything has been completed." Terry nodded. "Thank you." Ariel looked back and forth between them. "What's going on?" Terry didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the black leather briefcase he had carried ever since their wedding. From inside, he carefully removed a small dark wooden box. Ariel blinked in surprise. She assumed it was finally time for her wedding gift. Perhaps jewelry, perhaps a luxury watch, or something equally expensive. Thierry placed the wooden box in front of her. "Go ahead." Ariel slowly lifted the lid. Inside there was no diamond, no necklace, only a silver key, and a small handwritten card. She looked up. "What is this?" Thierry met her eyes. "The key to the studio we visited yesterday." Ariel gave a confused smile. "You're joking." "No." Attorney Miriam gently slid the legal documents toward Ariel. Please look at the first page. P. Ariel opened the file. Within seconds, she froze. Printed across the top of the page were the words, Katikivmate of Property Owner Shipona, Ariel Aching Property Address. The very same design studio in Westlands they had visited the day before. P. Ariel looked up in disbelief. No, there must be some mistake. Attorney Miriam smiled warmly. There is no mistake. The studio legally belongs to you. Ariel slowly turned toward Thierry. P. You, what is this? Thierry answered calmly. My wedding gift. She immediately shook her head. No, I can't accept this. Why not? It's too much. P. I haven't done anything to deserve it. Thierry looked directly into her eyes. You don't have to earn the right to own your future. Silence filled the room. P. Attorney Miriam opened another folder. I'm sorry. There's one more document. She placed another envelope in front of Ariel. This is a business startup fund. P. 420,000 Kenyan shillings. It has been set aside to support the studio during its first 2 years. Ariel could hardly believe what she was hearing. P. She slowly pushed her chair back. Thierry, why? Thierry sat down across from her. Because I've spent a lot of time thinking. Thinking about what? P. What would happen if one day you decided to leave this marriage? Ariel stared at him. Thierry continued. I don't want you to leave with nothing. P. If you stay, the studio is yours. If you leave, it is still yours. No one can take it away. P. A tear rolled slowly down Ariel's cheek. She had never imagined that a man would give his wife independence as a wedding gift, not to keep her, P, but so she would be free to choose, P. Later that afternoon, as they left the law firm, Ariel continued holding the folder tightly in her arms, almost afraid everything would disappear if she let go, P. The moment they reached the lobby, Thierry's phone rang. It was the president of the Kenya Architects Association. Thierry, you're still coming to the church this afternoon, aren't you? I'll be there. P. Everyone has already arrived. All right. The call ended. Ariel looked at him. What's happening? Thierry slipped the phone back into his pocket. P. This afternoon, the church is holding a Thanksgiving gathering after the wedding. She nodded. I know. Thierry looked at her for a few seconds. P. I have something I want to say. In public, yes. She looked uneasy. You don't have to. Everything has already become complicated enough. Thierry gently shook his head. P. Not yet. She frowned. What do you mean? He looked at the traffic flowing through Nairobi's busy streets. P. I don't want people to spend the rest of their lives saying that Thierry Camo bought himself a wife. Ariel tightened her grip on the folder. P. You don't owe anyone an explanation. No, I'm not doing it for them. He turned toward her. I'm doing it to give your dignity back. P. Those words left Ariel speechless. P. That afternoon, Claudine Achieng received a phone call from Pastor Daniel Mwangi. Mrs. Achieng, the Thanksgiving service will begin in about 30 minutes. I know, Mr. P. Thierry asked me to include one additional part in the program. Claudine looked surprised. What part? Pastor Daniel smiled. He wouldn't tell me. P. He only said it is the real wedding gift for Ariel. Claudine stood motionless. An unfamiliar feeling settled deep inside her heart. P. Across the city, Valerie Nanjeri was also getting ready to return to the church. As she finished changing into another elegant dress, her phone vibrated. A short message from Thierry appeared on the screen. P. Please stay beside Ariel when I step onto the stage. Valerie read the message twice. She had no idea what was about to happen. P. But she could feel that by the end of this afternoon, Ariel's life would never be the same again. Meanwhile, inside Thierry's black leather briefcase, beneath the property documents, lay one final sealed envelope. P. Written across the front in his own handwriting were the words, "The right to choose will always belong to Ariel." P. That was the gift that would soon leave the entire church in Karen speechless. The bells of the modern church in Karen rang once again. P. Less than 24 hours after the wedding ceremony, the sanctuary was filled to capacity. But this time, no one had come to witness another marriage. P. News of Claudine Achieng's emotional apology at the wedding reception had spread quickly through Nairobi's business community. Many guests had returned simply because they were curious. P. Outside the church, luxury cars lined the driveway beneath blooming jacaranda trees. Women wore vibrant designer kitenge gowns. Men arrived in tailored suits. P. Most believed they were about to witness a carefully prepared speech meant to protect the reputations of both families. None of them knew the person about to change everything was Thierry Kamau. Ariel stepped out of the car wearing a simple ivory dress, far less extravagant than her wedding gown but equally elegant. In her handbag rested the legal documents attorney Miriam had given her earlier that morning. Valerie hurried toward her. "Are you all right?" Ariel smiled faintly. "I honestly don't know." "Did you read all the documents?" "I did. And?" Ariel looked toward the church entrance. "I still don't understand why he did it." Valerie gently squeezed her hand. "Maybe today you'll finally understand." Across the courtyard, Claudine stood quietly beneath the church entrance. She looked at her daughter, then at Thierry. She had not slept all night. His words had echoed in her mind over and over. "The person who deserves your apology isn't me." Those words had hurt her more deeply than any accusation ever could. Pastor Daniel Mungi approached them. "It's time." Thierry nodded. "Yes." Inside the sanctuary, the congregation quickly settled into their seats. Pastor Daniel stepped onto the platform. "Today we gather to pray for this new marriage and to share a few words of gratitude." Before he could continue, Thierry rose to his feet. "Pastor, I'd like to speak first." Pastor Daniel looked surprised. "Of course." Thierry slowly walked to the front. He carried no prepared speech, no phone, only a white envelope. The entire church fell silent. He looked around the sanctuary. "Since yesterday morning, I've heard many stories about myself." A few uncomfortable chuckles echoed through the room. He continued, "Some people say I rescued the Achieng family. Some say I bought myself a wife. And some have even congratulated me for getting exactly what I wanted." He paused, then slowly shook his head. "They are all wrong." The silence deepened. Thierry turned toward Ariel. "There is one truth that I myself only recently discovered. When I agreed to this marriage, I believed Ariel had chosen it willingly." Ariel slowly lowered her eyes. Thierry faced the congregation again, but she was never given the opportunity to choose. Whispers spread across the sanctuary. A man seated in the third row quietly murmured, "I thought she agreed." The woman beside him slowly shook her head. Thierry continued, "If a marriage begins because one person is never allowed to say no, the other person has no right to call it love." The church became completely still. Claudine lowered her head. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks. Thierry opened the envelope. He removed a set of legal documents. "Yesterday, I completed every legal transfer." The design studio in Westlands, its full ownership, along with the startup investment fund, now legally belongs to Ariel Achieng. A wave of shocked gasps swept across the sanctuary. Even Pastor Daniel widened his eyes. Thierry held up the documents, but that isn't the most important gift. He placed the folder on the lectern, then removed one final document. "I have already signed another legal agreement. If Ariel decides to end this marriage, the studio will still belong entirely to her." No one moved, no one whispered. Only silence remained. Thierry looked across the congregation. "I never want anyone to believe that money can buy a woman. If Ariel chooses to stay, I want it to be because she wants to. If she chooses to leave, I want that to be her choice as well." He turned toward Ariel. "For the first time in your life, no one will decide your future for you again." Ariel's eyes filled with tears. Her hands trembled. She had never imagined that someone would stand before an entire community, not to claim her, but to return to her the one thing she should never have lost. Not money, not property, but the freedom to choose. Pastor Daniel slowly removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. "Thierry, yesterday I officiated your wedding. But today, I finally understand what those vows truly mean." In the front row, Claudine could no longer hold herself together. She slowly stood, walked toward Ariel. And before the entire church, the woman who had spent her whole life protecting her image knelt. "Ariel," she sobbed, "I'm sorry. I allowed my fear to steal your freedom." The entire sanctuary froze. Ariel immediately bent down. "Mom, please don't. I don't want you kneeling." Claudine shook her head. "No. Today, I'm no longer asking anyone to protect my reputation. I'm only asking for one chance to become a better mother." Ariel embraced her. Mother and daughter wept together. Many people throughout the church quietly wiped away their own tears. Standing nearby, Valerie smiled through tears streaming down her face. P. An elderly woman sitting in the front row slowly rose to her feet. I always believed that mothers are always right. She looked at Claudine. P. Today I learned that parents also need to know how to say, I'm sorry. Many people nodded in agreement. Thierry remained standing on the platform. P. He did not step forward. He understood this moment no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her mother and to her daughter. Several minutes later, Ariel finally released her mother. P. She turned toward Thierry. Their eyes met. The distance between them had disappeared. Only countless unspoken feelings remained. Ariel slowly walked toward the front of the church. Every eye followed her. She accepted the microphone, took a deep breath, then spoke calmly. Yesterday, I walked into this church believing I had no other choice. She paused. Today, I finally do. She looked directly at Thierry. You gave me freedom, and that is more precious than any wedding gift. Thierry said nothing. He simply smiled. Then Ariel continued. I'm not going to give my answer today. I want for the first time in my life to choose someone with my own heart. The sanctuary erupted into heartfelt applause, not because of a wedding, but because everyone had just witnessed a woman reclaim her own voice. And that was the true beginning of Ariel and Thierry's marriage. 1 year later, Ariel Atelier in Westlands had become one of Nairobi's most admired handcrafted accessory studios. Beyond creating elegant pieces that blended modern design with the rich cultural heritage of Kenya, Ariel also launched free training programs for women who had once been forced to abandon their dreams because of difficult family circumstances. Every month, the studio welcomed new participants, teaching them valuable skills, helping them build personal brands, and giving them the confidence to earn their own income. Claudine Ashieng no longer tried to control her daughter's life. Instead, she quietly volunteered behind the scenes at Ariel's exhibitions, managing logistics and ensuring everything ran smoothly. She often sat quietly in the corner, watching Ariel confidently present each new collection with tears of pride shining in her eyes. Thierry remained faithfully by his wife's side, yet he never stepped into the spotlight to claim credit for her achievements. Whenever people praised Ariel's success, he would simply smile and say that everything she had accomplished came from her own talent, perseverance, and courage. Every year on their wedding anniversary, they returned together to the church in Karen, not to remember the death that had once brought them together, but to remember the day a woman was given back the right to choose her own future, and the day genuine love truly began. The part of this story that stays with me the most is not that Ariel received a beautiful design studio or financial support to build her future. It is the moment someone finally gave her back the right to make decisions about her own life. In life, many people make choices on behalf of those they love in the name of family, responsibility, or even love itself. They may genuinely believe they are making the best decision. Yet without realizing it, they take away another person's voice, dreams, and freedom. True love is never about keeping someone beside you through guilt, obligation, or sacrifice. True love is giving someone enough freedom that, if they choose to stay with their whole heart. If one day you become a parent, a spouse, or someone whose decisions shape another person's life, remember this: respect will always be more valuable than control. The greatest gift we can give someone is not wealth or security, but the freedom to choose the life they truly want. Only then can they become the fullest version of themselves. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know your thoughts. What is the biggest lesson you took away from Ariel's journey? Share it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so we can continue spreading messages of kindness, respect, and the life-changing power of giving others the freedom to choose.